So I first got my training in New York at a cooking school called International Culinary Center. I trained in classic French cooking, and during that time I also worked at Spice Market and Mercer Kitchen, which are both part of Chef John George's restaurants. And especially at Spice Market, he used a lot of classic French techniques, but also combines it with Asian flavors, a lot of exotic flavors, and that's where I learned how to use different spices, because in Korea the only spice pretty much that we use is spicy hot pepper, gochujang. And yeah, so there's that. And I came back to Toronto and worked a little bit at the Salette French Bistro and Brockton General, just down the street, on that street. Fusion, I don't have a problem with the word fusion, but I know a lot of chefs do. But I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It's just different flavors from different cultures coming together, right? But I like fusion if it's done right, if it's done organically. But right now in the food scene, there's a lot of fusion restaurants that kind of force two different flavors together and just to try to make it fusion. But I think real fusion I really appreciate, like even like Japanese curry katsu. To me, that's real fusion, because that's something that the Japanese took from the Western culture and like Indian spices and put them together, and it became their own everyday comfort food. So to me, something like that is real fusion. But in Toronto, there's not. I feel like we're lacking a real fusion that just came organically. But not to say that Toronto doesn't have amazing food, because we have probably some of the best regional cuisines, just not a lot of good fusion. I think my passion for food started when I was growing up in Vancouver, because the school that I was going to, I was 9 years old when we first moved to Vancouver, and we had there were a lot of Asian students, a lot from like Cantonese students, and just pretty diverse. And every time I went to my friends' homes, visited their houses, their parents would sometimes cook for us, and it would be so different from the food that I was used to eating growing up in Korea, and that was really fascinating to me. And that's when my passion for food first started. My childhood, my favorite dish as a child was actually McDonald's. I loved going to McDonald's with my dad and just getting a Happy Meal. The fries, the cheeseburger, and the toy that you that was my favorite. My mom cooked a lot. She was a great cook. She actually went to a vocational cooking school and learned French cooking as well. And so she cooked a lot of good Korean food as well as some Western inspired food. So growing up in Korea, our version of Western food was like hamburg steak, kind of like Japanese, have a similar style of cooking, yoshoku style, that kind of stuff, like just fried rice with omelette on top, or pan-seared hamburg steak with rice and gravy, things like that. Comforting food. So a couple of months ago, we actually had a special. We had a special yoshoku night where we featured a couple of yoshoku dishes, like Japanese Western inspired hamburg dish with rice, and what else? Curry, Japanese curry. Yoshoku cooking is, from what I understand, it's just a Western inspired Japanese cooking, where the Japanese, they took traditional Western style of cooking and made their own twist to it, adding flavors that they're used to, and adding rice. So there were a couple of influences, I think. Definitely a lot of Japanese influence. Well, with Japan and Korea, there were a lot of back and forth. Japanese taking inspiration from Korean cuisine, and then later on, Koreans taking it from Japanese cooking as well. A lot of Japanese cooking is they took the inspiration that they took from Korea, they refined it, and just took it to a more refined level, and then Koreans in turn took inspiration from that and made it kind of theirs as well. So there's that, but there's also when the Korean War happened, there were a lot of American soldiers who fought in Korea during the war and during the Korean War, and they got a lot of food. They got shipped a lot of Western food like spam. Spam is a big one, and then they kind of made it Korean by adding it to a spicy stew. It's called military soup, 부대찌개, and so that's the most, I think, iconic sort of Western inspired food. When I'm coming up with new recipes, there's really not much thought process involved. I just kind of play around with different techniques. Like our oxtail gnocchi that we have in the restaurant, for example. I was taught how to make Parisian gnocchi when I was in cooking school, and I loved the texture of the fluffy gnocchi, and then the crispy texture it gets on the outside when you deep fry it. But I also love rich, sort of hearty flavors and Korean fermented flavors. So I combined all those ingredients together, like the oxtail. I braise oxtail with Korean doenjang, which is a fermented soybean paste. I put them together, braise it with sake and mirin, and just. But my goal wasn't to make it, force it to be fusion. It was just something that organically happened when I was just trying to make something tasty. With Uncle Mikey's, my goal was to, when we first opened, was to create a space where customers can feel like they're my friends coming over to my house and I'm cooking for them. And when I used to have dinner parties, I would cook whatever I want to cook. Like the gnocchi was something that I cooked a lot for my friends. But I would also make sure we have really good wines and just good drinks, because I like to drink. And so I was always into good wines, but I also just became recently interested in sake. And I was really amazed at the diversity of sake. All the different methods of brewing and different flavor profiles and different pairings, and it was really exciting for me. It still is really exciting for me to be able to pair different foods with sake, but also with wine as well. With our sake and wine list, they're both pretty small. It's a pretty small wine list and sake list, but I try to make it as diverse as possible. So with our sake list, I'll get suggestions from you, Mariko. We'll have a pretty diverse selection. Like one will be like a funky sake brewed in the Kimoto method, or something clean like the Niwa no Ubisu Daikinjo. And we'll have some other fun ones like the Eau de Désir, which is also very interesting. And yeah, I like sakes that all have very distinct flavors. Our food is pretty loud. There's a lot of big flavors. I'm not a big fan of subtlety. So everything is salty, sweet, spicy. So I like to pair it with wines and sakes that can hold up to them. Even with like wines, I like funkier sort of wines that like organic biodynamic wines. A lot of those tend to, with natural aging, they tend to have a sort of funky aroma to it, which not a lot of people like, but surprisingly when they pair it with our food, they learn to like it, which I enjoy.
Bye.